Okay, welcome back, everybody. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next session. Great speakers. This session is about practical tips around hiring in an omni-channel world. Very interesting topic. And our two speakers are, first speaker is Brigham Tomko, CEO and co-founder for Immersion. Alongside Brigham, we have Maya Vertesi, Talent Acquisition Manager from Computer Center. Yeah, really looking forward to the session and would like to hand over to the speakers to kick off the session.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I'm excited to have Maya here with us. And I'll kick off by doing a quick introduction of the topic, introduce Maya and I a little bit, and then we'll get into a discussion on hiring for an omni-channel world. So we want to talk about communication skills and how specifically screening for language skills should be a top priority in hiring. Companies can invest heavily in providing better tools for communication, but if the agent on the other side of the phone, text, email, or chatbot doesn't have the necessary language skills to handle the conversation, the investment was wasted. So spending on global outsourced services for contact centers nearly doubling over the last decade, qualification for language skills shouldn't be more valuable. If language skills are so important, how are we testing them? Nearly $50 billion is spent each year qualifying language talent, but only about $5 billion of that is spent on technology right now. Most of the investment is in human processes and human capital. And as we can see over the last year, a lot of those processes need to be adjusted with work from home and different processes, especially with the workforce being located in so many different locations. So we want to focus on how we can maintain great communication skills, specifically language skills, as a top priority in hiring contact center agents. In this session, I'm pleased to be joined by Maya Vertesi from Computer Center. Maya, I want to give a little background on you and me, and then we'll jump into those questions. So Maya Vertesi joined Computer Center as a recruiter in 2016 after several years of hard work and determination that she also attributes to great mentoring. She is now the talent acquisition manager of Computer Center, Hungary and Spain. Prior to Computer Center, she led an association and was a project manager for a nonprofit organization. She has a background in economics and majored in human resources and photography. She currently lives in Budapest with her partner. When she's not keeping busy with work, she is often in the garden painting with their dog and a glass of wine. So glad to have you here, Maya.
Thank you.
Welcome. Quick background on me. I've experienced starting companies in multiple countries around the world, and I've played a founding role in various industries, including online education, offshore staffing, call center, and recruitment, market research, and digital media. I have a degree in accounting, a law degree in MBA from BYU. I'm married and I have 5 children, and I speak Thai and I'm learning Spanish. So we're excited to be here with you today. So Maya, can you tell me a little about the setup at Computer Center and how you do omni-channel communication between your agents and customers?
Sure. So Computer Center is an IT provider company. We are present globally in several countries in most of the continents, employing in total 16,000 employees. And what we have basically is like 2 parts of our business. One of them is the product and the other one is the services. And when it comes to the omnichannel support, that's mainly in that context, I'm going to reflect on service desk, because it means that we are providing support to our customers in global service desk from various locations, in various channels, and in several languages, over 20 languages across the globe. And clearly it's because we have multinational clients, so that requires several languages, really the right support to our customers. In terms of the channels, we use phone, emails, the ticketing system, of course, and we also using chats for the daily support in those areas.
Great. And you covered this a little bit. What are some of the top qualifications you're looking for with the talent as you hire them?
Right. So, from coming from the introduction, it's not going to be a surprise that one of the main elements is the language knowledge. And it's particularly important because it's really not something that you can train in a few weeks or even in a few months. So when it comes to knowing and speaking a foreign language and also writing in a foreign language on a certain level, it's not something that you can, let's say, hope for that, by the joining, it's not possible, but within a few months with the right training, your employees are going to be ready. So it's really something that you need to assess at the beginning in order to make the decision if it's going to work or not. And that's why language skill is one of the top priorities. The second is customer-focused mindset, in simply because they are going to work with customers. These type of jobs, it's all about that you really care about your customer. You really want to make the best, and even if not all solutions or not all scenarios are perfect, you intend to deliver a great support to your customer. And if you have that certain attention in terms of tools, processes, and everything else, that's something that the company can support you. But you really want that kind of good customer service to your customers. And the third part is clearly a certain affinity to IT. We do not require any kind of knowledge or any kind of experience with IT related topics, but it's important that you have a certain connection to technicality, because without that in long term, if you don't really enjoy or if you're not interested in the field that you are working on, it's not really going to last. It can work for a couple of months or even a couple of years, but in long term it will not come up with a great solution at the end.
Yeah. That's great. So you mentioned three things: language skills, communication skills, and some technical affinity. Focusing on the communication and language skills, those are both important qualifications in your search. How do you believe those skills are different? And do you believe it's important to screen specifically for both language skill and communication skill?
Right. Yes, I think there is a difference in the two. When I say, and it could be that it's not shared among everyone, that it's two different things, but in my view they are, because it could be that you speak a language to a certain level. It's a foreign language. It's something that you learn in school. It's something that you learned abroad. It's something that I don't know, you have a parent in the given a nationality, but it doesn't mean necessarily you have good communication skills. It means that you reach to a really good level in a foreign language. And when it comes to communication, that means the person is able to create a positive atmosphere during the conversation. It means the person is able to express himself or herself in a clear way. It also means the person is a really good listener and contributes to the conversations effectively and positively. And if you try to merge those two, and if you try to evaluate once, you cannot necessarily identify that where is the gap. So it could be that the person is a really good communicator but has some limitations on the given language. But it also could be that the person is really good in a certain language. For example, mother or father was, I don't know, in a given nationalities, but not really able to create that atmosphere that you would require when the person is going to talk to the customers. And if you try to merge, it could be that you come to wrong conclusions, that what's the issue, if it's the right level of language knowledge or if it's the communication skills in general.
Yeah. Well, I happen to be one of those that agree with you that those are two separate skills. I've had many experiences with people in their native language who aren't good communicators. So just by knowing the language doesn't make that possible. But similarly, if you don't speak the language, it's hard to communicate, regardless of that mindset. So yeah, I think I definitely agree, and those are important to assess. You oversee talent acquisition for both Hungary and Spain. On average, how many agents are you hiring each year?
Right. So it depends on the given period. It used to be between 200 and 300 for Spain. And also it was the same for Hungary. It was a very strong year in 2017 when we had a huge expansion of the site, and it was 400, more than 400 in a given year. But since then it's dropping, so it's going down to 200, and last year it was not even 100 in both locations. Clearly, one of them is related to coronavirus. I think everybody was, on holding a bit with all the hirings, but the main reason for that is that these centers, Barcelona was founded 10-15 years ago, Budapest is like 5 years ago, and there is a phase when you build up the center and then you just kind of replace and you make a few additions, but it's not that volume of hiring that it was before. Ideally, it's not that, not the same volume.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is kind of a question that's probably on a lot of people's mind, but with coronavirus that you mentioned, how have some of your processes changed for language or communication or other employment screenings over this past year?
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting question, how it has been changed by coronavirus, but it also had a certain, let's say, how it was built from the very basic solutions to the more advanced ones. So if I take it from the historical order, we started, I believe in many of the organizations are using that methodology, that they have certain people at the interviews speaking the language, or even not the same person who's doing the evaluation as a hiring manager, but they invite someone to the interview, and they just simply do their task. Potentially or probably it's something that you also had the written part, but it's not a rare case that it would be something created internally. So it's really something that I think it works well in that sense that those people know what's required on a daily basis. And they have a really good understanding in general that what customer likes and what they dislike, but it's not something I would definitely call as like accurate or objective. These people are not specialized on understanding different levels of languages, and they're definitely not certified evaluators, let's say, in terms of when it comes to language skills. But that's a very common thing among the companies, how they do assessments, and we have also started like this in both locations. And for Hungary, the next step was when we started to use a third party, a language school, which was specialized, among other things, for certifying candidates for certain jobs. And the reason for that was that we really prefer to have, let's say, official template on the evaluations, because from time to time we have received from the customers some escalations for the language knowledge, and it can come from two reasons. One of them is that the person was not correctly assessed, or it could be that something happened in the meantime, either to the employee or to the customer, suddenly require more, but it's really, really difficult to figure out that what's wrong, where's the issue. If you just have those internals, it was fine at the interview. If this is all what you can say when it comes to an escalation, we figured that it's just much more safe if we have such, let's say, accredited and really certified third party to say that, okay, this person has the right level of knowledge, and this is what the customer requires. There you go. There is the official stamp, ready to hire. So that was the second step. Yeah. For the methodology, it was the same. So well, similar. I don't say same. It was like a phone call for the speaking part, and a written test was no longer paper based, but an electronical way, but a very similar one than before. Yeah. And the third option is what we're using today is immersion testing. And I'm not sure if I'm the right person to introduce about immersion, but The reason why we changed it was really for even with the third party, we saw that sometimes we have the same kind of escalations. It's still something that's not automated. It's still something made by people. It's still something that you might think that it's super objective, but it's not all the time. And also in process, in terms of how user friendly, in terms of how much time we can save, also in terms of many aspects. And probably we're going to talk about this more, but that this is, let's say, the third stage of the evolution of the language testing at CC.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I think a lot of contact centers and BPOs deal with, is having some certainty of the level of ability. One of the things that we've seen is some companies have different service level agreements with their customers that require different levels of language skill, or in your case, maybe even different levels of IT capability, tier 1 versus tier 2 support, ways to set different cut points for different hiring for customers. So we've seen, and we've also experienced this ourselves, that when there isn't just a single cut point, this one's good enough, how do I evaluate who should be on the tier 2 support, or who should be on that top team? Having that independent sort of third party evaluation of that has been something that's helpful. You also talked about some of your transition during coronavirus. Part of our group of companies, we have offshore business in the Philippines, and we have 300 software developers, and we got notice from the government that we had 48 hours to have all of our employees working from home. So that alone was a very difficult process, but what it also forced was our entire recruiting process went from being in person to remote in a 48-hour period. And obviously it's our company, so we use immersion, so it was easy to do the language component of that. But I think those transitions are difficult, and also as companies are starting to scale, it's not just coronavirus, it's digital transformation in general that's been pushing us in that direction. So want to talk a little bit about where digital transformation at a time like this is a hot topic. You've recently begun leading that effort of introducing automated testing, and you talked through that in the evolution that you did there. How do you see digital transformation continuing to change or help your recruiting process evolve over time? Do you see that as a continual transformation towards more digital process?
Yeah, that's an interesting question in that terms. I think in general, the word is welcoming automated solutions, and I honestly believe that's whatever we like it or not, that's going to be the future. So I think it's, for that one, the same applies as to, I believe, to everything else, is that finding the right balance between the automated solutions and the human factors. I think that's kind of a guarantee for a positive outcome in terms of efficiency and in terms of candidate experience. What we have seen when we fully needed to change to the recruitment to be online 100%, that was quite interesting in that sense. For example, it was much more like their daily lives when they came to the office in person, because they are supporting customers in different locations, and they are going to be in contact via telephone, via chat, via email, via ticketing tools. So it was in a strange way more everyday life like than in the old way when we saw them in person. Also, what we have seen is that, for example, more people show up. So before, if it was raining, you could know that, okay, at least 10-20% of the interviews are going to be cancelled because it's raining. So in that sense, there has been some positive parts, but in that sense, when it comes to two people working together, it's a certain chemistry involved, and I think you need to listen to that instinct until a certain extent, and not to push back everything around competencies and professionalism, etc. But it's true that potentially it's a person that you will need to work with and be with for long years. So it's a bit more, let's say, sterile in that sense. And many of the managers suffered that they felt that they're not that confident anymore to make the decisions if they really want to work with that person or not, because they had more difficult position to judge. But when it comes to the language testing, or when it comes to the partially it's automated, it was pretty much welcomed by most of the areas, simply due to the effectiveness of the new way.
Yeah, I think really good point, and many people might be surprised to hear this from me, because I'm in a artificial intelligence based software company. But I agree with you. I'm a firm believer that technology should enhance the human experience, not replace the human experience. And I think in a recruiting process, where you may have 10 or 15 applicants per hire, you can apply some technology on the front end to screen out candidates, whether it's language ability through a test like immersion, or some general cognitive ability that narrows that down. And that way your people can spend more time with the qualified candidates instead of spending time weeding out the unqualified ones. And so I think that's a really important point that we shouldn't lose as digital transformation keeps going through, that again, digital should enhance the human experience, not replace it. And so we find ways where we can gain efficiencies there. So I like that point that you made.
Very true. And just one comment on that. We tend to think with the head of the managers and the hiring managers and we as a company. But what we also have seen from many of the candidates, they were kind of try to seek for opportunities, for example, coming to the office just to see. Also, they have this, they feel just more safe if they went there,
yeah.
if they have seen the desk,
yeah.
if they have could look into the eye of the hiring manager. It's really interesting to see that also from the candidates side, there is a certain level of need for that personal meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we see a lot of companies, some take the idea of using digital assessment and say, hey, people can do that remote. But many of our customers still have their recruits come into the office, and they'll take the assessment in the office so they get that experience that you're talking about. And if the results are immediate, like the immersion test, they can be in the office, take the test, they pass, and a recruiter can meet with them immediately. So during coronavirus, it often has forced everything to be remote. But I think as we get back to normal, those hybrid processes of using technology, even in the in-office application process, whatever benefits most. I have a couple more questions, but I see one in the chat that I think is interesting. It's back, Maya, to probably almost to question one, some of the qualifications you look for. But someone asked, what level of, I'll summarize it, what level of education is required? Is a high school graduation enough? Do you look for college graduation? Is that relevant in your hiring process?
Yeah, so the answer to that is going to be simple and short. It's very, in these roles, we are very skill focused. So regardless of academical background, regardless of previous job experiences, if the person has the right capabilities and the willingness and the motivation to do this job, it's welcome on board.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the trend of education and in the workplace across the globe, that it's more of a skill or competency based system. The hard part is many skills are hard to evaluate. So we rely on, well, they have a college degree, well, that must mean they know how to do that, but it doesn't really. So finding ways to verify or assess that competency is key. One thing that I think is interesting too is where some of these evaluations fit in a recruiting process. Sometimes companies want to do a phone screen, first, and then they come in the office and do a first interview, and then you have some cognitive or other assessments. Some companies like to put the assessments out front so that you're only talking to qualified candidates. I'd love to hear kind of where Computer Center puts assessments in the recruiting process, and maybe why you put them, there versus another place in the process.
Right. So what we have in place for the language assessment, it's happening after the initial call. So we have received the CVs, we review the CVs, and then we make a short phone call. But when I say short phone call, I really mean it. So it's not like a telephone interview with 30-40 minutes, but it's really just a pre-screening with a short catch-up, validating what's written in the CV, verifying the person is still interested in the job, knowing what the job is about, and starting date, salary requirements. So it's really just the screening, and it's also beneficial to do that before you send out a test, so they would understand that it's something that's coming from you and not just suddenly they receive an email, probably they don't notice it, or if it goes the notification goes among the system messages, so they would really recognize that, okay, this is something I really need to deal with. So in that sense, I think it's the best if the candidates know it in advance that there is a test coming and they really need to do it. It's also a good opportunity to explain to them that, as soon as they do it, you can move forward, and it's also up to them how fast is their recruitment process. So what's working best for us is that we have a short call in advance, preparing them what's coming, and then we send out the tests, and they complete the test, and then we, depending on the result, we move on to the next steps. It has certain reasons why certain companies have a certain order. I think it can also differ by the position. It also, for example, why we do this way, because we have that amount of candidates when we can handle this. If we received, let's say, hundreds of candidates every day, probably we would consider to have it a bit sooner, and kind of applying that who's filling the test without any preparation already as a filter. But I think it can differ from the certain situation, from the certain position, what's the candidate volume that you need to process. So it can be different what's the most optimal for a certain search.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You mentioned you get the human touch in early with that phone call and go that direction. But I think your follow-up point was interesting. We talk to many companies that have customers who are hiring tens or even hundreds of thousands of people a year, and you might have 10 applicants for hire, so you might be looking at 100,000 to 1 million applications a year. And in those very high volume settings, like you said, you probably need some sort of screening earlier on, because it's just so overwhelming to the staff to have that many that many opportunities. So it's interesting because we see some of our large global call center customers putting this automated language assessment first, just as a way to weed out half of the candidates before they get there. And many others we see similar to Computer Center, where when you can, having that human touch early on is a great value add as well. We're coming up to the end of time here, and I just wanted to see, Maya, do you have anything else you'd want to say in conclusion before I jump in and wrap up the call?
Well, maybe just to summarize in general for the language assessment and automation, I think it's good if you are experimental and if you keep your eyes open. We just started to use Immersion a couple of months ago, and so far it's working quite well. And in general, I think it's I just encourage everyone to keep being curious and try new solutions. Some will fit you, some will not, but if you don't try, you won't know.
Yeah, Thanks, Maya. Well, we really appreciate you and Computer Center, and I enjoyed learning from you today. It helps me be a better business owner and manager, learning from you. We want to thank all those who joined us today, and if you have any questions, please feel free to stop by our booth in the expo hall or check out more of our solutions we offer with automated language testing at www.immersion.ai. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.